interestingly, a lot of like cheaper strap-ons and like shops that call themselves like novelty sex shops, in places where you're not actually allowed to sell sex toys legally, like are geared to women who like are into pegging or like and fucking their partners with strap-ons. And I thought that was really interesting because when I think of a strap-on, like I think of lesbians, like I think of almost specifically dyke culture. But like when you look on the box for that like cheap strap-on, you're not gonna. I don't see who I thought I was gonna see in a strap-on. Quite the contrary.
And there's this book that I always see at like sex shops called "How to Be a Dominant Diva," and it's like geared towards like this particular image of like a woman who is wanting to be like toppy and dominant with her. I didn't remember the whole thing, but I feel like a lot of it assumes that the partner is like her straight boyfriend. She wants to like,
And Good Vibrations Guide to Sex too. Like I find that like that's kind of the outlook too, where it's like, yeah, I guess lesbians and gay men exist. They get a picture every 50, 60 pages. But really, when we're talking about topping and bottoming, we're still talking about like straight women who want to like mix it up. One of the interesting things I also found when trying to research this thing we're doing here is that there isn't a lot of like scholarship that I could find about like lesbians writing about being tops and bottoms in like in critical essay format. That the critical essays that I was finding were about gay men particularly and predominantly. So, which of course reflects just like the dearth of scholarship around like lesbian lives and like and like the lives of like queer like women assigned people in general. I
don't know, my dad, like bless his heart, bought me this book about like same-sex unions in Europe. Like it was like a history book about whatever, and he thought it would like that I would enjoy it, and I really appreciated it because like my dad tries to buy me like history books sometimes, and like so I'm reading like the first 20 pages, and it's this dude who's talking about same-sex unions in Europe and the history of it and whatever, and he says in the introduction, he's like, there's one paragraph where he's like, most of like the majority of the people I'm talking about in this book are men who are like in some sort of union with men, because he gives this like bullshit answer. He's like, well, there's just not any like information on lesbians in like Europe and like whatever. And my favorite part is when he said and I wrote an article about this that then has become this book, and that like a noted feminist scholar wrote a very critical essay about it, like critiquing me, saying that I should have like included women and like all this stuff. And then he had a footnote, and he was like, in order to be courteous, I'm going to refrain from putting her name or the name of the like critical essay in this text. And I was like, okay, so you're basically just like getting out of having to like be accountable to the fact that you're like only concentrating on men and like framing it in a situation that's not like specific. Like, when my dad picked up this book, he probably didn't like know that, and like, you would hope that like a book about like same-sex unions would be about like a broad spectrum, but like, because there's that old trope that like there's no information about lesbians or like women who love women, or like anybody who's like female assigned at birth loving anybody, like, I don't know. I just thought it was like he was trying to be courteous. I'm like, yeah, suck a dick, like whatever.
But would that be topping or bottoming? Yeah, did you have something you wanted to say? Okay. Well, we're like coming to the point where we need to wrap up. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. If you have questions, comments, concerns, or complaints, please get at me at getwettv@gmail.com. If you can't spell it, I'm sorry for you. We'll also have a blog up in no time to receive questions and comments that way. And look out for in the library and a bathroom near you for a comment box or complaint box or question box that you can just drop it in physically. So thanks you all for coming. And I'll come again. Applause, please. Can you do one of those shots where it moves across the top of the head? That's the one. For more information about topping and bottoming, please consult The Whole Lesbian Sex Book by Felice Newman, or the topping book, the new topping book and the new bottoming book by Daisy Easton and Janet W. Hardy. And for more information about S&M topping and bottoming and issues pertaining to that, I would recommend Screw the Roses, Send Me the Thorns by Philip Miller.